Hello, I'm Dave and this is Fiver, out once again for a walk in the countryside. Thanks for joining us. Now today we're at the pretty village of Okeford Fitzpaine in Dorset. It's located about 3 miles south of Sturminster Newton and 6 miles northwest of Blandford Forum. And we're going to be walking a roughly 5.5 mile circular route. We'll have a wander through the village before heading northwest to check out the hill fort at Banbury Hill. We'll then head south past Knackers and on to the tiny village of Belchalwell. And then finally we'll head north back to Okeford Fitzpaine. And I'm sure there'll be lots of interesting things to see along the way. Now I'm filming at the end of September. It really is a glorious sunny day. I can hardly see any clouds at all. Blue sky. Should be perfect conditions for walking. Do come along with us. Okay, well we'll start off our walk with a little wander through the village, and what better place to start than the church, which is just behind me here. And it's the Church of St Andrew that stands on a knoll on the southeastern side of the village. Now there was probably a wooden church here in the 10th century, but a stone church was built here in the late 13th, early 14th century that consisted of a nave, a chancel, a north porch and a west tower. And then north and south aisles were added in the Tudor times. But basically the whole church was rebuilt in 1866 using stone from the original church, trying to keep the design and structure similar to the previous layout. And I think they retained the west tower from the original church. Well, I'll have a quick peep inside. So just as we come in, there's the font behind the board. And quite magnificent it is as well. A beautiful stained glass window behind. That really is quite splendid. And then coming through the nave, the pulpit there on the right with some quite ornate carvings. Never seen anything quite like that before. And just going through to the chancel. There's the organ on the left with some very pretty patterns painted, and then a terrific stained glass window above the altar. And I think this is my favourite of the stained glass windows in one of the aisles of the nave. Now Arthur Mee, in his King's England Dorset book that he wrote in the 1930s, had a bit to say about Okeford Fitzpaine. Forgive me if I read a passage. Okeford Fitzpaine, set among grand hills and deep lanes, its lovely cottages have some of the daintiest windows and doorways and old roofs that could be found in Dorset. Only what our own time has given it robs it of perfection. From the lovely road climbing over Okeford Hill, we see it in the foreground of a marvellous view stretching northward for miles. Its 15th century church has been refashioned, but it has a few fragments of old glass and two strange things. A 14th century window in the old tower, which seems to be inside out, and a medieval pulpit of carved and painted stone, which was once built into the wall and used as a font. One of the windows is a tribute to Rivers Hunter, who preached from this pulpit for 52 years. And built into the churchyard wall are many fragments of the ancient church, bits of moulded stones and others with inscriptions. And there's one other thing. One of the queerest things we heard of this place is a joke, old enough to be new, for it goes back to 1264. It is recorded that R. Fitzpaine and W. Govis were excused from paying certain dues on land here in consideration of their good services to the king at the Battle of Lewes. And the joke is that they fought against the king and helped take him prisoner, then using his seal to stamp the document excusing them for their disloyalty. Brilliant. Now, as far as the history of the village is concerned, it was recorded as Adford in the Domesday Book when the tenant-in-chief was Glastonbury Abbey, I think. Okeford comes from Oak Tree Ford, which probably related to a ford over the River Stour to the north, where Child Okeford is. And the Fitzpaine bit comes from the Fitzpaines, who were lords of the manor here in the late 13th, early 14th century. I think up until as recently as the 1960s, much of the village was actually still owned by the Pitt Rivers family before the estate was gradually sold off. Now, our old friend Sir Frederick Treves, in his book Highways and Byways in Dorset that he wrote in 1906, also had a few things to say about the village. Okeford Fitzpaine, the next place along the road, is as pretty an old world village as will be found in this green hollow of the Shire. The village is of some size, being made up of two rambling streets in the form of a cross. It is part of the Dorset of old days. Just been having a lovely long chat with a local called Mike, who was out walking his dog. He's a regular viewer to the channel. Hello to you, Mike. We had quite a long chat actually, because we used to work for the same organisation. Of course, now he's the proud owner of a Dave's Countryside Walk badge. Well, just opposite the church is the rectory, which I think dates to the mid-18th century. Just to the east of the church is what was once a primitive Methodist chapel built in 1859. Looks like it's now residential. Now, this is the old schoolhouse, which I think dates to 1837, and it was the first school in the village before a newer one was built in 1873. Gosh, look at that lovely old door. It actually was the village jail. I think the actual jail or cell is now bricked up, not sure. That's the old village cross, which is medieval. It's a sort of octagonal cross base now. The missing bit is the shaft and the head. There's the village stores, which dates to the late 18th century. It used to be a couple of cottages and indeed was once a pub called the Bell Inn. Oh, one of those lovely green telephone boxes. A K6, isn't it? Ah, now that's the village museum, which I think was home to a hand-operated fire appliance, which dates to 1809, last used in 1942 when the school caught fire. And there is the slightly more modern school, built in 1873, but I think it may have closed as a school as recently as 2023, not sure. Ah, the Royal Oak pub. Now, there used to be 5 pubs in the area, but now there's just one remaining, and this one dates to the 19th century. And this building here, another Methodist chapel, built in 1830, but closed as a chapel in the 1990s and looks like it's residential now. Well, what a pretty village Okeford Fitzpaine is, I'm sure you'll agree. Well, we're going to head northwards following a footpath, and looks like we go past a place called Drove House. We're just crossing over a little stream called Dark Knoll Brook. It eventually flows into the River Stour to the north, and the source of the brook here isn't that far away to the south. Well, folks, I haven't shown you any footage of me and Fiver out walking across fields because Well, it's been interesting. I mean, we went through 2 fields of horses and 2 fields of cows and crossed over a bridge that was just about crossable. I don't think it'll last too many more months. So we'll continue head northwards, another field of cows, and so we're looking out for a fort eventually. Well, I'll tell you, it's one of those really quite gorgeous early autumnal days. A little bit of freshness everywhere. So I'm just stopping just to have a look back where I've come across some fields, and I'll tell you, the views across to the ridge, and must be Banbury Hill over to the right there. It really is quite stunning. Well, I'll tell you, this is one of those walks that you really do have to keep stopping to take in some views. So in the middle of this field I can see to the north Hambledon Hill and Hod Hill. Well, this is as far north as I'm going to go on the walk, a place called Banbury Hill, where there is an Iron Age earthwork, although whether I'm going to see too much of it, I'm not so sure. Basically, there was a single bank that enclosed a roughly circular area of about 3 acres, and the bank was about 15 metres wide, about half a metre high, with a ditch that was, well, as wide as 8 metres in places and about 1.5 metres deep. And the entrance was on the west side. Well, folks, I think that's all I'm going to be able to see of that Iron Age enclosure, the sort of one corner of it. So it's in a private field, but the rest of it was all behind a thick hedge. Well, a little update on the route. We've left Banbury Hill, which you can just see behind me, come through another field of cows and just about to go through a bit of woodland called Okeford Common. Well, we've come through the little wooded section, heading across another field. It's going to take us to a place called Knackers Hole. I have no idea where it gets its name from, but a brilliant name nonetheless. Well, we've just crossed a little road. We're continuing to head southwards past a place called Garland's farm, and also it's a racehorse training establishment. Well, another trig point which we can bag, 121 metres above sea level. Now in the old days, of course, Logan used to sit on top of these. I'm not going to risk it with a fiver. So I'll have to bag it in an unconventional manner with him sitting alongside. Well, there's a rather little idyllic lake or pond down there, and you can see the training gallops, the all-weather gallop going up the hill there where the horses train. Well, another update on the route. This is where we cross Garland's Lane and head eastwards and then past a farm and then southwards to Belchalwell. Well, we've made it to the tiny little village of Belchalwell. Now, it's not actually mentioned in the Domesday Book, as far as I can see. Its name derives from two manors that were here in the 13th century, Bel and Chaldwell. The Bel bit might have been a corruption of Beltane, which is sort of an old Celtic May Day festival celebrated by lighting beacons on hills, and of course there is Bell Hill just to the south of here. The Chaldwell bit might derive from Anglo-Saxon for cool water or spring. Well, Sir Frederick Treves had a few things to say about the place. At Belchalwell nearby is a church which has been deserted by its village, of which but a few cottages now remain. The church is placed on a solitary mound commanding a near view of the downs. It has a little low square tower and an elaborate Norman porch. Roses are climbing over the chancel windows, and when I visited the place in June, a turbulent assembly of bees had established a colony under the ancient eaves. Well, speaking of the church, it's just behind me here. And what a pretty church it is too, the Church of St Aldhelm. The nave is the oldest part, dating from the 12th century, and the chancel, north aisle, south tower and south porch were all added in the 15th century. And there was a big restoration in the 19th century. I think it's just got the one bell. Of course, St Aldhelm, or St Aldhelm, I can never pronounce his name correctly, was the first Bishop of Sherborne at Sherborne Abbey in 705 AD. Well, we'll have our usual little peep inside. And there's the font just inside by the door. And that's looking over to the west. And then just coming through the nave, the wooden pulpit on the right, and there's the bell tower. Yeah, I can just see the one Sally. Well, it looks as though there's no conventional organ, but I think that's a reed organ over there. I'm not sure. And then through to the chancel with the altar. I don't think there are any stained glass windows, but it's still a very pretty church nonetheless. And look at the sun streaming through the window on the south there. Well, I had to make this little detour to the south to Raven Cottage. Of course, it was home to Jack Hargreaves, who died in 1994 at the age of 82. Of course, he filmed parts of his series of old country from his shed here. Well, we're now going to leave Belchalwell and head eastwards on the final leg of our journey back to Okeford Fitzpaine. We're just coming back into Okeford Fitzpaine from the sort of south, and this is the old animal pound. It shows on a 1902 map. Of course, it's where sort of stray animals would have been impounded, pending being reclaimed by their owners or sold at auction. I think the original pound was elsewhere in the village, in Pound Lane. Well, just as we come back into the village, it's just a couple of little things to look at. This gorgeous thatched cottage here, Nutmeg Cottage, I believe was once a pub called the New Inn. And then just further down from Nutmeg Cottage, I think there was once another pub in the village called Nine Elms that burnt down in a fire. And it was roughly where this building is here today, or somewhere about here. Well folks, we've come to the end of our walk. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do give us a thumbs up and a like, and do leave a comment, and do check out our Facebook page, Dave's Countryside Walks. No pub today, so we're doing the end scene in the animal pound, but there's still time for a sausage. Good boy. So until we meet again, thanks for watching. Cheerio.